Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here's your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode in the People in Fundraising Conversations series. We're now about a year and a half into this program. I appreciate people's engagement and support. Today is November 1st, 2023, and I am really honored to welcome Stephanie Brouwer to the podcast. Hey, Stephanie, good to see you.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Oh, my pleasure. You are the very first person on the program from Indiana, so go Hoosiers. So thank you. And Stephanie, if you could tell our audience your title, your company, what type of work you do as just a bit of introduction, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so I currently am the Senior Prospect Manager at Creative Fundraising Advisors. We are a fundraising consulting firm based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, with representation with clients all across the country. My role in particular is I work with data and research. So that can look a lot of different things, but it's a lot of training, a lot of workshops, and all things under the hood, helping clients with those services.
Awesome. And I know from your LinkedIn that you are you hybrid? Are you fully remote? I forget.
Fully remote. I'm fully remote, and I'm based in Indianapolis. And with quarterly sessions, we're actually getting ready to all co-work together this week up in Chicago. And we're 15 mighty individuals spread across multiple different states across the country.
Dynamite. And how long have you been with?
2.5 years. I started in 2021. And have been there since, and have watched our company grow from 4 to over 15 now, which is really exciting.
Dynamite. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. And we'll get to it later, but you just mentioned Indianapolis, and we've got a couple of questions related to the city, but also to a really pivotal role you played with Apra in Indianapolis this past summer. So just a little teaser for our audience. Before we get to that point, Stephanie, I'd love for you to spend a few minutes just talking about how you entered the nonprofit development world, please.
Sure. I am an avid listener to your podcast, and my story is not dissimilar from others who have been on, but I fell into prospect research. Mm-hmm. To try to keep a long story as short as possible, I graduated with an education degree. I was up working on that in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And then I decided education is not my passion. I'm going to go into library science. And so I started working on my degree in library science and needed a job. And so I fell into housing and residence life. An introverted me somehow got into a job. I had been an RA for 3 years in college. And so I took a position in Northwest Indiana, where I have been since 2008. And I worked for a college for 5 years in that role, and I got so burnt out very quickly because of the given statement of introvertedness. And so I landed a prospect research job. Chanel Burns, I'm going to credit her right now, was the first person to hire me. She's still in the industry. We keep in touch. I think she took a chance on me. I had a master's degree in library science, no knowledge of advancement other than what the college I was working at had. And I got my start there. And so I've been in the field since 2013. I was at Valpo for a couple years and saw campaign. I saw well screening. I saw database conversion. I got to see it all without knowing that I got to see it. And the basis I got was amazing. Switched down to Indianapolis with my ex-husband's move. I was a librarian for a hot second, but ever since then, I got back into prospect research, and I've been doing that ever since. So 10 years in the industry, most recently between library now. I also worked at United Way of Central Indiana, which gave me a whole new toolkit of skills and understanding about prospect research. Most recently at Marian University in higher ed. So it's again, not dissimilar, but it is a journey that you look back on and think, wow, all of that was just informing my now role, which is consulting and front facing. And I love it. It's such a great fit.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And I have to imagine, Stephanie, that the variety of firms and sectors within fundraising that you worked at have been beneficial to where you are at this point.
Yes, especially, I didn't mention, but our firm it does represent clients of all different sectors. So it was really helpful having a non-higher ed background because, a lot of our organizations are human services and the arts, and it's a different ballgame when you get out of higher ed. There's similar, consistencies between, but there is, like I said, a new script, you have to have tools. And I think that's where I'm really glad that I did get to experience different ones.
Sure. Yeah, and I think also you mentioned tools just now, like the availability of tools, the funding available to purchase those tools, it's a wide variance across this industry.
Exactly.
Yeah. Dynamite. Well, thank you for that introduction of your career and how you got to this point. We're gonna dive in now to Apra and Indianapolis. So in addition to your role, your day job, you also last year chaired the 2023 Apra PD conference planning committee. So congratulations on taking on that massive role, and talk to us please about what that work, it's all volunteer, what that work entailed, and then the preparation that goes into actually launching the conference and what it meant for you as a resident of Indianapolis to have it in your city, please.
Sure, yes. So what many people might not know is how an advanced APRA works as far as succession planning. So I actually was tapped to be the PD chair a year before I started, and that allowed me to shadow CPC. I had served on it before, but I did have a year of knowledge knowing that I would be entering it. And so at the PD prior to me joining, I tried to recruit. I honestly was listening for feedback of what are the things that people are talking about, what they want to see, where are opportunities, etc. And so you're right. It was a volunteer position that sometimes felt at times like a full-time job. However, another really nice thing is I did not have to do it alone. Not only APRA staff, but the curriculum planning committee. I had almost 20 individuals who are volunteering and helping look for sessions, recruiting speakers, collaborating with the speakers. And so in that role, I actually took on a new look for me as a delegator and as a leader and a describing our mission, because that's what CPC chair was, especially is driving. I set the theme with help from Apra marketing, and I was really the one who was cheerleading and rallying, and then I got down to the basics. But there's peaks and valleys with planning the conference, because you think about it, you have to put the message out, get the speakers to come, make sure they're good. It's a year-long initiative. But leading up to Indianapolis, the next part of your question, I was so excited to welcome everybody to the city because I want to show it off. Yeah. You don't come to Indianapolis really unless you have family, work, or sports. Sure. Those are the three big things. But when everybody got here, the number one comment I think I heard was how beautiful it was, or how much green grass there was. And I was like, in the area you are, there has been intentional efforts from the city to build it up. And I'm so proud of being able to be in a city that can host this. But it was a different experience. I stayed on site, which I recommend it for any conference chair, knowing I had the luxury of coming home, but I wanted to be immersed in the conference. And let me tell you, I am so glad I had a 15-minute ride home after the conference. So I went to 4 days I mentioned being an introvert. I went to 4 days of no extroverting whatsoever. But it was amazing because I was proud to show it off and invite people in. And I went into hostess mode, quite honestly. I just wanted everybody to have a good time in whatever way that they were looking for.
Yeah, that is remarkable. And I drove through Indianapolis summer of 22. We stopped on a family road trip from Kentucky back to Utah, where we live. and my good friend and former manager, Jason Beffert, lived in Muncie. And so he drove.
Sure. Yeah, Ball State area.
Yeah. And so we met him. Is it the Sailors and Soldiers Monument?
The big circle monument downtown. Yes.
Yeah. It was such I did not know quite what to expect from Indianapolis. I hadn't been there before, but I was like, man, this is impressive. I want to come back. I'm not into the Indy 500.
Good. Everybody is welcome. Everyone on this podcast. Indy is cool and you want to come here.
Totally. And I was going to ask, we didn't have it in the questionnaire, but I was going to ask, and you already mentioned it, that you stayed on site and just, and you mentioned like kind of the immersive experience that was for you. So really cool.
Yeah, it was important to me because I did not actually go to many happy hours just because I was pretty exhausted. But I wanted to be there right away in the morning and not have that distraction of getting dressed at my house and fighting traffic. I wanted to be as close to simulating the conference as I could get with only being 15 minutes away.
Yeah, that is so smart.
Yeah, I'd recommend it.
And so you mentioned, Stephanie, that you had a year to be exposed into shadow. What does that look like for you now? Coming off that committee, please.
Sure. Yeah, I always think that each person incoming has a different approach to learning style. And so my learning style, I actually was not as active with the chair before me, Carrie, who did an amazing job, because I didn't want it to be how I saw Carrie do the conference. I wanted it to be my ideas, my thoughts, my research, etc. And I then extended the same thing to our incoming chair, now current chair, John. And I asked him, how best do you learn? What can I tell you? And so we met actually once a month, and I keep him involved in the process of, here's what I'm really busy with now. Here are some tips that I could suggest. But I always wanted it to be here's what I did, the rationale behind why I did it. I encourage you to think about, what would you do? What do you want? Because all of us collectively are going to come from a different approach. And so I think for him, for the incoming who has been named, it will probably look a little bit different as well. But it's so great to have somebody that you can go to, and he is welcome to reach out to me anytime. I make that super clear.
Yeah, so cool. And I think that is a really smart strategy. And you got that whole year ahead of time. And I think there, for people like you and for me that volunteer with Big Apra International, like, it can feel like we're taking a big bite out of something, but to be able to break it down, managing work and life and whatnot, it's that, and that's one of the things I've tried to get out of other guests who have been Apra volunteers, to also message to people that have thought about being a volunteer. Like, it seems like it's a big ask to get involved, but in addition to the benefits of being on site in Indianapolis, what do you feel you have gained just from the broad sweep of being an Apra volunteer, please?
Sure. Apra, I feel like, has really, I don't think I would be the same person without Apra. It's so cheesy. I tell everybody, if you want someone who's drank the Kool-Aid, you're going to find this girl, because Apra has been a safe space for me to be exactly who I am and accepted. I don't have to try to be an extrovert, and this is what a leader is. I think Apra celebrates a community where you come as you are, and there's always help around the corner. And so that's why I volunteer, is because I feel thanked. I want to do it. And I think Apra does a very good intentional job of connecting people to their passion areas. They look at the volunteer interest survey and they take that of they are interested in this, let's connect them to it. I had a passion for getting behind the scenes of the conference, and I was fortunate enough to be the conference chair because I wanted to feel like I could make a difference. And that is the area that I got to. And it was the most rewarding Apra experience I've had. It can be little. Apra is looking for, again, anybody in any way or how many hours. you dictate that. And that's why I love it, because they see you as a person and appreciate all that you have to give.
Yeah, well said. And that's been my experience as well. So yeah, I think that quickly kind of demystifies some of like the expectation I had as a volunteer. Like we are really valued, we're appreciated, and that's even before you deliver whatever you're volunteering to do.
For sure. And there's a lot of support. Our volunteer army for APRA is giant. And there's no forced expectation if somebody's not ready. It took me a while to volunteer for Big Apra. I got some time on Apra Indiana for a long time. Worked my way up to the bigger. And so there's all different levels, and it depends on if you are ready to give that or not.
Sure, definitely. Well, Stephanie, you mentioned the word passion, and I, as the host, I try to sometimes key on words or phrases that provide segues to other questions. So in addition to being the passion volunteer, what feeds your passion with APRA? Writ larger, what are you passionate about when it comes to social impact philanthropy, please?
Sure. I have always been passionate about giving back and helping people understand the best way they can use their talents to serve others. And so fundraising has always been that, because it is something where you are connecting and unifying people who have an interest in something and getting them to that interest. So that's why in my job currently, when I get to talk about data and research at a nonprofit, I love that I get to help make our world and community a better place in my skill set. If I'm not the officer at there, I can encourage people to understand what skills, what are you not thinking about? And I love just in general, I'm a very big believer in we're meant to be on this world to help each other. And that's why I'm so passionate about what I do, because I just love that we're all connected. And I feel like we have an honor to take care of each other. And so I'm in the right field, right profession. It gets draining, absolutely. But I am really passionate about, helping it distill into others. What are you passionate about? Let's get you into there and demystifying what fundraising is. It's not hitting people up for money. It is about connecting people to opportunities where they can make a difference.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I was intrigued by, you mentioned just now, Stephanie, it can get overwhelming, which is true for everyone. And I even saw a LinkedIn post this morning about someone needing to unplug. Whatever you're comfortable sharing, I'd love to hear, how do you register that for yourself when it gets overwhelming? And what do you then do to recharge, recenter, whatever that looks like for you, please?
Sure. And honestly, you're asking me a question that I've had to actively practice for the past decade. One other side segment that'd be helpful for your users to know is since 2010, I've been a Strengths Finder educator. So the Gallup-Clifton Strengths Assessment, I have been teaching and coaching people for that for over a decade. And that is how I know I have a very good self-awareness of when I'm going too fast. I by nature am, like I said, an introvert, but a very practiced extrovert. And so honestly, to recharge, it sometimes will look sitting in silence by myself. After the Apra conference, I sat on the corner of my couch and I didn't say anything or talk. I just existed. And that was really important for me, because I realized when I'm going too hard and I need to dial back, I need to take a day off. I need to take rest days, and that is coming. I'm not going to say I can be a little hypocrite of you need to take off. I can say all day long to somebody else what to do. I don't always take that advice. And so I actually have people around me who I have asked to help me accountable. I have, my partner, my boss, I have told them to recognize signs where if I am too stubborn to take the rest or time that I need, I have given them also safe ways to tell me, because telling me to rest or not work is very, very hard mentality for me. but I like to, like I said, I don't always sit in silence. I'm not boring people, but I love reading. I am huge into Pilates right now.
Oh,
I love music. I'm usually always listening to music when I'm not interacting with somebody. And I give myself plenty of time to go into what I call the apartment in my brain and
yeah.
just hang out. And I find that it's a day by day thing. I took 2 sick days in the past couple weeks, and I'm like, I could have gotten so much work done. At the same time, I
Yeah.
learned that I'm more efficient when I take the time, and I can come back stronger than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Mhm.
great advice. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I think it's so critical, A, that you recognize it in yourself, and B, that you have voiced that to other people. You mentioned your partner, your boss.
Mhm.
I think that's a step, just, in my like work and personal life conversations that people can miss, because it's like, I don't want to like ask for a favor. Like, I don't want to put something on someone else.
Right.
But it gets to what you said earlier, Stephanie, about we're here to help other people.
Mhm.
And so I love that connection, that synergy between those different aspects.
Yeah, and I think it's working up towards that. It's making sure that you have a really strong trust established in there, because I don't always like to hear that, but the more you can be open with, I need people to keep me in check. And then I try to always think, if I was giving this advice to somebody else, am I honestly taking it? And that's where I'll be the first to say I don't always take my own advice, but I'm a work in progress and day by day.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Um, I loved that answer. That was great. And that right there is like the heart of the conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so as you were relaying your experience in the nonprofit world and getting to the point you're at now, I wondered, as you prepared for today's conversation and you saw these questions and maybe reflecting on your career, do you have a specific moment or project where you felt that you had definitely made the right choice for a career, but also you were hitting your stride? And I just want to put this quote in there too, from the famous jazz artist Miles Davis. Sometimes you have to play a long time to be able to play like yourself. So anything come to mind for you?
Two things. One in the very beginning of my career, letting me know I was on the right direction. And recently in this career switch to where I am now, it happened. So very briefly about both. The first job I landed in was Valpo. And like I said, Valparaiso University. I didn't know what I was doing. I was given such a good ground foundation. But near my end of my time there, I was doing a lot of profiles, and we had to get creative about also pushing new prospects out. And so my coworker and I, who I adore and still talk to now, we would read the student newspaper, especially the alumni section. And we noticed, I think I noticed in the school paper that there was an alum who came back to give a talk to a business class, and I looked him up in the database and had a pretty significant wealth capacity rating, never been interacted with, et cetera, had never given.
Mm.
And so I did a profile on that person and pushed it to the gift officer. Luckily, had built some trust with them. That person ended up giving $1 million to the college.
Nice.
That was a really good, hey, I think I'm pretty good at this. I kind of understand how to find prospects, getting in the mindset. And so that was a success I have not yet seen into that straightforward extent.
Mm.
But the other time I think I had was when I transitioned to working in consulting. I was terrified. Who wants to listen to me? Do I have enough experience? And I remember the first client that I interacted with, I had studied and prepared. I was going to be the best consultant there is. And I am also not, I would say, the most adaptable of just let's change things up. But I have become that. And
Mm.
so we spent an hour off road of what I had planned, showing them resources and guides and best practices. and it was exactly what they needed. And I got to pull all my toolkit stuff back out. And I left that trip thinking, I did it. I made it.
Yeah.
And it was the coolest feeling of just, I think I have a really good skill set for this job, but I have to be, one, more self-confidence, and two, just listen. Just that's the most part of being a good worker / now consultant, is just giving people a voice and hearing them and reacting to it. And that's where I think both of those successes have just, I'm so grateful to have had them.
Those are great anecdotes. Thank you. You hit on, one at the beginning of your career, and then one that, gave you that confidence that, yes, the consulting route is worthwhile and fits me. So I think it's so important that people take that step back and contemplate, what were those moments that shaped me as a professional, because we spend so much of our time working. So I thank you for making that time to reflect on those moments and sharing them, Stephanie.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage people to, I am one that if I have 100 compliments, I'll think about the 101st criticism. But too much of our job is, it should be those compliments. And I encourage everybody to think about, collect those memories.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know. You never know where your job's going to come. And so I do encourage listeners, celebrate your successes. You did the best you could. If they weren't a success, you try again next time. And so you can get farther ahead when you release the baggage and really just open yourself up to be a human and make mistakes and look for the wins.
Yeah, so true. Well said. Thank you. You mentioned earlier, Stephanie, just as a segue to our next question, you've recently taken a couple of sick days, and you mentioned you need to have accountability for when you need to step back. And I try to source questions or content from various articles to get more of a well-rounded picture of my guests. So a couple of years ago, in fact, 4 years ago, there was an article in Harvard Business Review, and it noted that, quote, American workers are notoriously bad at using up their vacation time, end quote. And I've asked this question for a few other guests because I think the answers are important to our audience. So in your experience, whether that's currently or just in general, do you categorize yourself as a vacation delayer? Do you max out your time? What's your strategy?
I am an in-between. I used to hoard vacation days as if I would need all of them at the end of the cycle. But I have never been one to also burn through them. And I think I've landed somewhere in the middle. I think I honestly monitor my vacation hours. And when I know I don't have a trip that I'm saving for, I will use a vacation day to not do anything. And that has only come in the past year or two, where I have that with my boss too, of help me take this day as a vacation, because in a remote environment, you could be off doing something and take the vacation and chance it. I'm not really like that. And I also like to work, but I give myself permission of, if I take a vacation day, it means not checking emails, not taking chat, not taking calls. It is a day for myself. And it doesn't matter if I'm going somewhere or home, it's time that I'm giving to myself. And so that's how I've come to see vacation of, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you get time for a reason. And I try to, as best I can, monitor quarterly. And if I haven't taken a day off in a while, I will usually take 1 or 2 days to just reset, to get fresh, to get better engaged in what I'm doing. So I'm kind of in the middle of those two. Heavy was not using them. I don't see myself burning through them quite yet. Middle for quite a while.
Yes, yeah. And I feel like I was similar. I would just hoard vacation. And I remember 1 year, this is a quick tangent. I I worked at Harvard at the time when we closed between Christmas and New Year's. And so I just loved that extra vacation, didn't come out of my own time. But this particular, it was about November, I got summoned both to local and federal jury duty, like in mid-December. And I thought, oh man, there goes that week off. I'm going to lose it.
Oh, sure. Right.
And what I found out, at least in Massachusetts, was that the federal jury duty summons overrode the local jury one. So that got canceled.
Okay.
And then the federal jury, my number was so high up that the woman's like, you're not going to get called.
Sure. Yeah.
But my wife was like, you are obsessively holding on to that time. Like, you can't. Like, you've got to allow for some variability. This could happen again, or something else might happen. And so it was a wake-up call for me as well.
Yeah, exactly. I just had to coach somebody else who is sitting on, I think, 16 vacation days. I had a similar, do we think we need 16? Do we think maybe we could take a couple? And so it's a very real common thing, especially, I personally don't have kids. I'm sure a lot of people have to use them for reasons to not just take time for themselves. It's for their kids or for sick time. And I am so always in admiration of parents, and you have to have that unexpected, what if I need them? Usually workplaces, I find if you burn through them all, you can borrow against it, or a lot of workplaces respect that, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well said. Stephanie, we've got 2 other questions, and I know you've got a client meeting in about 20 minutes. So yeah. I just want to preface the time bandwidth we have. So the last question on our questionnaire was from an October 2022 New York Times article that was titled, "Did the pandemic change your personality? Possibly." And the quote in that article I drew from says that it may have been the restructuring of our routines instead of overall stress that reshaped people's personalities. And so that article came out, a year after you joined your current firm. Anything that you reflected on that speaks to you about the headline or the quote itself?
Yeah, I really, I gave this one a lot of thought. I think the difference, for me personally, Stephanie, in answering this question is my mom passed away right at the start of the pandemic. It had been coming, but not. And at the time, we didn't know what the pandemic was. And so that was April of 2020, April 2020. And so to answer the question, though, I was suddenly in a working environment, isolated. My mom had passed away. I had to have a whole new script at play with being a worker, with being a family member, with being a partner, etc. And so the question I did really think about, now that it's 3 years, oh my goodness, it feels like forever ago. And I thought about it. I don't think my personality changed at all. I think I had to adapt to how I could have my personality come out in a different way. When somebody loses a loved one, it shakes a lot up. And then the pandemic shook a lot of things up in the workplace and personal life. And I look back now and I realize at the start of the pandemic, I also learned a lot of things about what the workplace environment is and limitations and opportunities. And I think, again, with being introverted, I suddenly had to understand I still need support and I need to reach out to people, but that has to be intentional. And so I think now I've really worked a balance of, I still struggle with it every day. I work remote. I could be happy as a clam being at home base forever. Yeah. I know that I am a better person when I'm socializing, when I'm talking, when I'm interacting. And so it's a heavy packed answer for me that I love reflecting on, and I wouldn't change it. I think it's just difficult because we don't always get to stop and think, wow, that was a really traumatic thing.
Sure.
But trauma doesn't always have to be, okay, now I'm depressed and sad. How are we all people and humans despite what we're going through? And I think that the pandemic made me more sympathetic, empathetic to realizing that we see somebody's Zoom window and there could be 50 other things, a disaster off screen.
Yeah.
And I think that that is how it changed my personality of how do I give people a safe space in case they are experiencing something like that?
Yeah. Wow.
A lot. That's a big answer. I know.
No, that is profound and drawing on, personal loss. And I'm sorry for your mom's passing.
She was a beautiful woman. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And you remind me, my youngest brother-in-law is a bishop in our church, and he lives in the same town as we do. And when he got called to oversee this congregation, the previous bishop, met with him for a half hour or so before handing over the reins. And the advice he gave to my brother-in-law was, Matt, your congregation is this area of this city, and you know the people well. You see them every Sunday. You see them out in the neighborhood. And the former bishop said, but just remember, behind every door is sadness and hurt and loss and struggle. And as you said, like the 50 different things going off Zoom that we just don't know about.
Exactly. So. Yep, definitely. And the more we are supportive of each other and understand that, I think that's the direction I want the world to move in.
Yeah, absolutely. So great. Thank you for sharing that, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Our last question, I think there is some similar sentiment to it, both in terms of acknowledging our imperfections, but also how we can share those with others as a way to boost each other up. And I had wanted to have you on the program for quite a while. When I started out this project, I was looking at different states and who do I know, even very loosely in those states. And I also got a lot of that content from LinkedIn to build out prospective guests. So this screenshot is from over a year ago that Stephanie, you posted about. And I was so struck by the sincerity, the vulnerability, the generosity of your words. It just felt like a very deliberate and impactful message. We won't read it all for the sake of time, but you mentioned being on Apra's volunteer role and what it meant to be a volunteer leader and public speaking. And so you talk here about, and you mentioned earlier in the podcast too, about confidence and self-motivation, and that most people struggle with public speaking and confidence and such. But you said here that the secret is to embrace being myself.
Yeah.
And confidence and authenticity are refreshing for people. Everyone has fears, but the more we can be open to talking about those fears, the more we can truly connect with each other. And you close by voicing appreciation for being part of the Apra community. And the sincerity of that message, again, just really resonated with me to think, I've got to capture that and hope I can get Stephanie on the program. And here we are today. So before we get into your reflection, I just have to think that if it resonated with me, I'm sure it resonated with a lot of other people. And I hope that putting that out there into the Apra community, that you get a sense back that it was helpful to other people and that you are an important part of this community. So thank you.
Well, that means so much. Thank you.
Yeah. What comes to mind as you think about that post? And as we booked this interview, I shared it with you on LinkedIn message, and just what comes to mind, and now a year later, about confidence, public speaking, and putting yourself out there, please.
Sure. I think it's a constant reminder to myself. For so much of my time in life, thought I had to be a certain way. And that's what I think a lot of, I feel like in the Apra community, I was a volunteer in the beginning who I thought I needed to be extroverted, organized, had all the ideas, had all the understanding. And I carry that to every part of my life. If I don't feel like I have it together, then I am not going to be taken seriously as a professional. And then somewhere along the line in this Apra PD journey, last year really enforced this. When I am myself, it is so much, it's easier for me. It is an energy that other people have. And I think, honestly, it is the secret. I have been terrified of public speaking for a long time. I still am, unless I know the topic that I'm talking about or I've had ample time to prepare on it. Yeah. I like to describe my brain as spaghetti noodles. And when I talk, the spaghetti noodles don't come out, they come out a clump. That's how I describe my public speaking skills. Getting a little nervous thinking about it. But you have to trust that you're in a safe space. And Apra, over the past couple of years, 2-3 years since I've gotten involved, I have just seen when I am myself, I'm accepted, because people don't want cookie cutter versions of each other. That's not what makes a healthy work environment, a healthy any environment. It's our differences that relate. And by opening up, especially about struggles that I have, people have so many relatable, you name it. Even if my story isn't the same, I knew that it would resonate in the Apra community, because at the conference, if you saw me, I was hostess, asking people, talking, presenting. I looked like it had all together. In my head, scared, terrified.
Yeah.
But I found the more you trust yourself and who you are and just try to be authentic, that's infectious. And people want to do that. And that means so much to me. I always am scared to put my inner thoughts to the verse, but I always think, you know what? I study people and I learn from them. And hopefully everybody knows, even if they're terrified of public speaking like me, you can do it without looking a certain way. It's just different. It's authentic. And that's what the world needs more of, not cookie cutter versions of the typical CPC leader, Stephanie or John or Tim. And we need that. And that's what makes everything really great. So it's still work in progress. I'm not perfect, but I think I just try to roll with being transparent and open to hopefully help somebody else feel like they got this. They can do it too.
Totally. I so appreciate that reflection and that answer, Stephanie. I feel like it's really just sincere and heartfelt. So thank you for that. That was so great. And I think that's, for me, and I'm sure for our audience too, like the big takeaway from your conversation is just, we're imperfect and we don't have it all put together. We're giving it our best shot, and let's acknowledge that and boost each other up. And that is such a sorely needed message in our profession and in our world today. So
I'll share one last thing about that. I travel regularly for work. In fact, I'm leaving tonight for another one. Every time I travel, I have a Choose Kindness sweatshirt that I wear. And I love when people see it and they say, I love your sweatshirt, because it's like take a deep breath. Let's be kind to each other and just appreciate that. And so that's my trademark, is I have a Choose Kindness sweatshirt that I'm a kindness cheerleader, so to speak.
I love that. That is so motivational. Thank you. Well, Stephanie, I really have enjoyed our time together. This has been one of the most heartfelt, certainly, conversations in this program, and so appreciate the time you've spent preparing, thinking things over, reflecting on your journey, both as a professional, but also as a person, that's why this program is titled People in Fundraising, not just professionals. Yeah. So really, it's been awesome. It's been an honor for me to have you on.
Well, thank you for giving people like me a voice. I mean, I encourage everybody to listen back. We're not all the same. Sure, maybe we got our stumble into the profession the same way, but we all have a unique story to tell and different experiences. And I've loved getting to listen in and hear people and what makes them unique and different. So thank you so much for doing this podcast. It's a lot of work, I'm sure, but just a really cool one.
Well, thank you. That means so much. I appreciate that.
You're doing your own. You're spreading kindness in a bigger platform. I have a sweatshirt. I need to just rent out a blimp, you know? The more we do this, the more people we can reach.
I love it. That's great. Well, Stephanie, thank you for your time today. Your interview will go live probably in January of 2024. I'm taking my own little break from posting for December, but I'm just am and will be honored to share your conversation with our audience at that point. So thank you, and thank you to our audience for your support. As Stephanie mentioned, listening in, tuning in, it means a lot, and it's motivating as well. So Stephanie, I hope to see you at Seattle in PD next summer.
Seattle. Can't keep me away. No, and I hope to see everybody there too, in person again. Yes.
That's so great. Well, thank you, Stephanie, and have a good rest of your week.
You too.